Hi, my name's Karina Walter and welcome to the Standard Newsroom. I'm here with St. Catharines Mayor Walter Sendzik for our second chat with the mayor. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. You had a very busy week, starting with the budget.
It was
2 nights of budget deliberations.
It was a very busy week, and we were well prepared for it, and we had a very good discussion about where we ended up. So, yeah, it seems like only yesterday, but it's been 5 days now.
The council passed a budget of 4.97%, and when they went around the horseshoe, pretty much there were 2 councillors who didn't agree with it, but the rest of them said they weren't happy with the number, but they were willing to live with it.
Right.
How do you feel about the end result?
Well, obviously, no one likes to come in and have a tax rate that's above the rate of inflation. It's a target that municipalities across Canada sort of work towards, and looking at where we are as a community and the pressures that we're facing and some of the challenges that are in front of us, I think this was a responsible budget. And as I said on Tuesday night, it's easy to always look for the areas in which to cut, but where I think a lot of leadership comes from is making the decisions on where not to cut and how to best position the city moving forward. And I think that's what this budget has effectively done.
And you mentioned on Monday night too that there's a new budget highlight book for residents.
Yep.
That they can find on the website. How did this come about?
Well, from my perspective and sort of my background in business is that, you know, much like a publicly traded company, you have financial highlights that are released to the shareholders. You have an annual business plan that is created and shared with the shareholders. And we are a corporation, and I think it's important for the public to have some kind of communication piece that shows how the budget was developed, what's in the budget, how the budget is broken down in an easy to understand format. So one of the first initiatives that we undertook as a budget committee was to work with the staff to come up with a document that we can put on the website so that anyone can download it and see where the dollars are being spent. Because I think that's the important part is people see taxes and they see where I'm paying on my property bill X, but they don't necessarily may understand where it's all going to within the entire corporation. So this is our way of sharing with the community how your taxpayers' dollars are being spent responsibly.
Okay, so if anybody wants to look at that, they can go to the city's website.
Yep, and it's been updated with the final numbers. So what you'll have on the website is essentially what we've approved on Tuesday night.
Okay. Part of that tax Tuesday night was an infrastructure levy of 1%,
yep.
Which is going to help with the $140 million in infrastructure deficit
yes.
in the city.
And that's, again, and what I want the viewers to understand is that this is not unique to St. Catharines. There's infrastructure deficits across the country, and they're largely created by when a municipality doesn't invest in its infrastructure in a way that maintains the current system. So one of the easiest ways to cut a tax rate and get down to, say, quote, zero, is to not invest in the areas which aren't visible. So underground infrastructure, you don't see it until it breaks. So those are areas where municipalities can pull its resources and go back to the public and say, hey, look, you know, we came in at a 0% increase. 5 years down the road where water mains start to break or sewer systems start to malfunction, then you get into that crisis. And having an infrastructure gap that is significant means that over time, the municipality hasn't properly invested in its infrastructure. So we've identified a gap of about $140 million. And that's a substantive amount of money, but it's over a 10-year period. So this infrastructure levy that was brought in will start to address it. It's not going to address it in year one, but allows us to start redirecting funds that come in through the levy to those critical areas that need to be addressed immediately. What we saw last year in the winter freeze that we had throughout February of last year, not this year, we had a significant amount of water main breaks all over the city. And they were largely in areas in which we hadn't invested in renewing of water mains. As climate change becomes more real, as it has a greater impact on communities such as St. Catharines, if we're not proactive in updating our infrastructure, we're going to have more and more residents facing flooding, facing loss of water. And I think from my perspective, that's again where leadership comes from. You can either ignore the issue, or you can get out and try and get out in front of it and try to mitigate the issue, and that's what I think this infrastructure levy does.
Is that infrastructure levy earmarked for specific projects, or is it going into emergency things like
It's earmarked for capital projects, and it allows staff in working with council to look at those areas of critical need. So what we've done through our asset management plan, looking at all of our infrastructure, is identified good, fair, and poor quality. And we want to target the areas like water main, where we have a significant, I think it's about 40% will be categorized as poor. We want to get that category adjusted so that it's in the fair to good range. And looking at all areas of our infrastructure, we've been able to categorize between the three categories and look at areas in which we're the most vulnerable. And this infrastructure levy will allow us to target those areas where we're most vulnerable in terms of our infrastructure.
Is it about $1 million a year?
It'll bring in about $1 million a year, and it also allows us to leverage that amount, but also more importantly, it shows the upper levels of government that we're not just going to go to Queen's Park or Ottawa and say, give us infrastructure money. We're going to go in and say, we actually have put a levy in place, and we're looking for you to be a partner. So we are acknowledging our gap, and we're looking to upper levels of government to be a partner in addressing the gap.
Do you think the city can ever close that gap, like and catch up to the $140 million, or is it something we're always going to deal with?
I think it's a long-term issue that is only starting to be addressed today, and where closing the gap completely is a financially challenging. It'd be financially challenging to close that gap, but can we start to close the gap and get to a more sustainable amount where we're not exposed? Yes, I think that's possible. Is it going to happen in 2 years? It's probably a 5 to 10 year program, and what we have put in place now is a system in which we can start to address it. And again, one of the federal and provincial, regional, and municipal governments across Canada have done this, where you pull out of infrastructure in order to lower tax rates, because people don't see it until the roads break down, until the different systems break down, and then we play catch up, and that is a dangerous way in which to sustain communities. And so this council has taken the proactive approach to say, we're going to put this in place this year and for the next 5 years, revisit it after 5 years to see what the impact has been, and to try and address the gaps that we face in terms of our infrastructure.
Do you see any top priorities yourself in terms of a road that's particularly bad, or a building that needs to be fixed?
Well, you look at Ontario Street, you look at Queenston Street in St. Catharines, you look at Ontario Street in St. Catharines, there's significant road repairs that need to take place. And what we've been able to do is, through the water main breaks last year, we've been able to do a data set on it and look at the areas in which there was the most significant amount of water breaks. So we have cluster zones now. When we had the flooding that took place last summer, through the flash flood that happened in St. Catharines, and actually throughout southwestern Ontario and Burlington had a significant flood, we were able to look at those areas that got hit the hardest by the floods. So we have cluster areas that we know need attention for certain infrastructures, infrastructure renewals, and that's allowed us to make better decisions as to where we're allocating our dollars.
Okay. You mentioned assets as well in the asset management plan. So my understanding is the city has a list of buildings that could be considered surplus. Well, yep. When does the council actually sit down and decide whether they're going to keep a building or get rid of it?
Well, we've already gone through the process with a certain amount of buildings. We've looked at Meriton Town Hall, and that's being in the process of being surplused. Looking at what the usage is for the city currently, and if it's not providing a primary use to the city, how do we move it out of a city building into a surplus asset. Once it's declared surplus, then what happens with the building is that we go to tender and we go to offer, and who wants to buy it can purchase it. We have a lot of buildings under ownership of the City of St. Catharines. The province of Ontario has gone through a similar initiative. The City of Toronto is going through a similar initiative where it's looking at all of its buildings and saying, why do we own these buildings? What is the purpose of owning buildings? And my philosophy is the buildings that we own should be owned for a purpose related to the City of St. Catharines, or related to a service that we provide. If it's not providing a service, then I don't think there's a reason why the city should then continuously own it. All levels of government are going through the same thing, and like I said, once we have identified it's no longer providing a service to the city, then we move to sell it, and hopefully there will be a group out there that will come forward and purchase it and turn it into a property that will generate tax revenue for the city.
Last year during the budget process, the city decided to get rid of the Fairview Golf Course.
Well, we didn't get rid of it.
Well,
we shut it down.
Shut down the Fairview Golf Course. What's going on with that property now? Is it going to be sold, or is it going to be kept as parkland?
Well, it's undergoing a park study right now. And one of the most important things for the public to understand, I think the fencing's gone down, so it's now a park-like environment where people can come and go. There's so many people that live in that sort of area around Fairview Parkland, and that's their backyards. So making sure that whatever plan is put in place is respectful of the people who live in the apartment buildings around there, that allows for them to use that as their public space, as a green space. It is an important part of the green space in our community. And how can we build it so that it has a beneficial use for the flow of sort of traffic, pedestrian traffic, bicycle traffic around that area. It is a substantive green space with a lot of willow trees. It's actually a gorgeous, mature public park, and through the parkland study we'll be able to best identify what's the usage for it.
Okay, so there's no decisions made on that yet?
No decisions made on it yet.
We had a reader question actually that kind of deals with that area as well. They wanted to know, Dr. Frank Cordray wanted to know if there are any plans to relieve traffic congestion around Fairview Mall and perhaps extend Secord Drive through the old golf course.
And that's something that has been talked about. The issue with extending Secord Drive would relate to the underground infrastructure. So for those of a certain age in St. Catharines would realize that was one of the corridors for the old Welland Canal. So that area, that parkland, was all filled in, and there was certain infrastructure that was placed underneath it. So it's a difficult parcel of land to simply put a roadway through, but as part of the parkland study, looking at creating a linkage on the pedestrian and bicycle path that will allow people to use that area. The whole area in question is a challenge when it comes to traffic. As someone who frequents that area, I myself am frustrated during certain parts of the year when going to use the different services there. So we have to find a better way to move the flow of traffic around there, and a lot of it has to stop and start with the Geneva Street underpass over the QEW. And we are working with staff to figure out how to better direct the traffic there, because I think that's where a bottleneck is. And because of that bottleneck, a lot of people are using the Lake Street entrance into the Fairview Mall as the corridor, and we've got to spread that out a bit. So whether that's the answer over on the Parkland one will come out of the Parkland study, but it's an area that we have to address for sure.
We have some other reader questions too, and I know we've got a little bit of time left. One of them is about Burgoyne Woods Pool. They're asking, Burgoyne Woods Pool was closed last year, but then it was kept open from fundraising dollars, and they're asking, Burgoyne Woods Pool generated $18,000 last summer compared to Meriton, which only generated $11,000. Why are we not closing Meriton Pool as it gets far less usage?
Right, that's one of those things where it's looking at the revenue raised, but the reality is that the Meriton Pool is the most modern in the system, and because of a spill that took place there a few years back, the entire system was changed and overhauled and updated. So essentially, if we were to close Meriton, we'd be closing a pool that actually meets most of the standards that are currently dictated by the provincial regulations in public health. So it would be taking a renewed system off the grid, out of commission, and keeping one going, which is one of the oldest in the system. By good fortune, we kept it open last year through the investments of business people in our community, and we're very thankful for that. Now we're looking at the concept called a destination pool. And a destination pool has been built in other communities, and it's about locating a pool that is accessible, but it's also more built around a multi-use concept where you have two pools connecting, and Mississauga and London have done a wonderful job on this, where it's a destination for families to go. The pools in Port Dalhousie and Meriton, those are pools where kids go and they have fun and they learn to swim, and it's an activity for them to do during the day. The destination pools are more about families coming in and spending a day in the pool. Burgoyne Woods is an ideal location for that, I'll be honest. When you look at what the amenities have in the park, from the soccer fields, the tennis courts, the baseball diamonds, the forests that people can go, they have areas where you can have picnics. It's all there. It's a complete park. And so if that was the choice of council, that having a destination pool in Burgoyne Woods, we would then move forward on a study to look at what infrastructure is required to actually build a destination pool in that area. I do know that the infrastructure at Burgoyne Woods is challenging, and it's been challenging for a number of years. So our intention is to build is to create a renewal project for that area, and I know serious consideration will be given to Burgoyne Woods as a destination pool.
Great. I think we've run out of time. So thank you very much for being with us today, and we'll have to get to some of these other things next month.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
If anybody has any questions for the mayor for our next chat in April, you can tweet them to us using the hashtag AskSenzik or post them on our Facebook page. Thanks for joining us.